All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to discuss the last topic for the legislative branch, how a bill becomes a law. We have saved its most essential job for last. This is what Congress is known for. Its sole purpose is to make laws. That process is a pretty extensive one. Some common features. All bills have to go through the House and Senate at some point in time. Only bills that spend money or raise money through taxes have to start in the House. Any other bill could start in the House or the Senate. All bills have to go through committees in the House and Senate. We'll talk about that. And then they have to be passed by the entire House and the entire Senate. If they come up with different versions, they've got to iron out a single bill from the two bills that were passed, and then eventually the president has one of three things that the president can do. So those are sort of the common features. It looks like a board game, and so this is the whole point of this. But if you want to understand this a little bit better, you can look at any of these two screens to figure out, what the process is. This is a great Schoolhouse Rock video called I'm Just a Bill. It's not playing on my computer for some reason, but I highly, highly recommend that you go back and take a look at it at some point in time. The Founding Fathers wanted the process of bill making to be slow. They thought that making bills quickly led to bad bills. So they purposely created a slow process that was inefficient. Because again, they thought that efficiency meant that you had one person making all the decisions, and that's oppressive. So they purposely made it so that you had to get lots of people's input. For that reason, it's very difficult to get laws passed. From 2017 to 2019, basically the first years of Trump, there were over 11,000 bills introduced, and out of those 11,000, only 474 pass and become law. So again, it's a small percentage. What does this system force Congress to do? It forces Congress and the parties to compromise and talk. And because they're not doing much compromising and because they're not doing much talking, this number is actually one of the lowest numbers that we've ever had as far as productive Congresses go. So they created a slow process, and then because of gridlock and party polarization, that has only made it worse. By the end of this whole lesson, you should be able to tell me how these 5 groups impact the process of how bills become law. You have to tell me what powers political parties have. And really what I want to know are all of the powers that the majority party has, and what powers, if any, does the minority party have? What do committees do, and why are they important? That is a key piece of information that you are going to have to know. What role do caucuses play? Which is going to be pretty minor, and I might even skip that. Rules of lawmaking. What are some of the more interesting rules of lawmaking that have an impact? For this, I'm thinking about things like a filibuster and cloture and discharge petitions and pocket vetoes. So those are things that I'm looking for in this little section. And then finally, what powers does the president have in this process? So you should be able to tell me about all of these things by the time I'm done. So come back to this screen and I would make a cheat sheet about these things. Okay, so once again, let's say I want to pass a bill called the SNOR Act, SNOR, and it stands for Students Need Optimal Rest. What my bill does is it says that high schools in the United States may not start until 9 a.m. or later. Because my bill does not spend any money, it can start in the House or the Senate. So for my purpose, I'm just going to start in the House. It doesn't have to, but I'm just going to start in the House. You need to highlight that ideas for bills can come from citizens, but really where they come from are interest groups and corporations. Interest groups and corporations contact people in Congress that they have friendships with and get them to sponsor bills that they like. The other group that comes up with most ideas for bills is the executive branch, the president. Why? Because when the president runs to be president, they first make what? They make promises. And those promises later become ideas for bills. Let's see if this sounds familiar. I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to have Mexico pay for it. I'm going to kick out illegal immigrants. I am going to lower your taxes. Those are all promises that President Trump made, and those were promises that became bills once he became president of the United States. Now, you do need to understand that only members of Congress can actually turn in a bill, but interest groups and corporations can write bills and then give it to members of the House and Senate, and they can then turn it in. Or they can just ask the member of the House or Senate to write it and turn it in on their behalf. Once that law is written and turned in by the rep, it is turned in the House in a tray called the hopper, and it's given a number. That number is the number bill that it is. So if our bill was H.R. 911, that means it's the 911th bill that has been turned in. And then at this point, this is one of the special features of the majority party, and in particular, the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House then has to decide what committee that bill goes to. This is hugely important, and this is one of the powers that the Speaker has. The Speaker chooses the leaders of each committee. So if the Speaker doesn't like a bill, the Speaker will just go to that leader of the committee and say, I don't want this bill to pass, and the Speaker is basically going to kill the bill. Or if the Speaker really likes the bill, the Speaker is going to go to that committee chair and say, listen, I want this bill to be passed, and if you want to stay chairman, then you're going to get it passed. And so the Speaker can tell the chairman what to do, and because they are of the majority party, they're going to basically get what they want. So this is a huge decision, though, right off the bat. And by the way, if the minority party wants a bill to be passed, they have no chance because the Speaker is going to kill it. Why? Because it's a bill from the other side. Let me talk real quickly about the committee process and the system overall. There are 4 types of committees. The ones that we're going to be spending the most time talking about are standing committees. These are committees that deal with topics of bills. And the committee is set up based on a topic that they are in charge of. So think of committees like departments in a school. There's the social studies department, and their job is to teach all things social studies. There is an agriculture committee. So any bill that deals with agriculture goes to the agriculture committee. The agriculture committee is a type of standing committee. So it's a committee that has a certain subject matter. And we're going to find out in the House there are 19 standing committees, and in the Senate there are 16. And there's a lot of overlap between those. They are the ones that handle most, if not all, of the bills. And remember, we talked about oversight, that Congress has the ability to investigate what the president and the executive branch are doing, these committees would investigate topics or parts of the committee that they are in charge of. So the Agriculture Committee would be in charge of investigating the Department of Agriculture. So hopefully you see that connection. So standing committees are the big committees. These are the ones that we think about when we think about making laws and passing laws. They are the ones that have most of the power, and they do most of the work. There are some committees that are called joint committees. And let me go back for a second. Standing committees are only House or only Senate, meaning that they have only members of the House in them or only members of the Senate in them. Now, there are some committees that are called joint committees, and these are committees that have both members of the House and the Senate on them. There are very few, there are very, very few joint standing committees. Most standing committees are not joint. They are solo, meaning only House, only Senate. The most famous joint committee is a conference committee. So a conference committee, remember, if we go back to the board game version of how a bill becomes a law, if the House passes a bill and the Senate passes a bill about the same topic, but those two bills are different. So let's say for my SNORE Act, for instance, the House says, yeah, we like the bill at 9 a.m., but the Senate says, well, we don't like it. We like it at 10 a.m. Then it's the same SNORE Act, but they're different. So the conference committee, which would be members of the House and members of the Senate, would come together and compromise about the bill. And so maybe when they set their conference committee, they end up compromising and saying 9:30. So the conference committee resolves differences between House and Senate bills that are about the same topic but are different. And then finally, the last type of committee is a select committee. And these are committees that investigate some sort of scandal. Select committees are temporary. So they are created to investigate, and then when they're done investigating, they go away. So they are temporary. You can use them for oversight if the scandal is of a particular part of the executive branch. So for instance, there was a Watergate committee that was looking into what happened with Watergate and were any crimes committed, and that was a select committee. And so they investigated the president and the executive branch about Watergate, and the president ended up quitting before they developed articles of impeachment. But it was going to be a select committee on Watergate that was going to write up those charges of impeachment. So those are the four committees. For our discussions, we're pretty much going to focus on standing and then conference for a little bit toward the end. Okay, I'm going to just briefly give you some general background information about committees, and then we'll start tomorrow to talk about why committees are important. So in committees, and we're talking about either the House or the Senate, each committee is led by a chairman. The chairman is a member of the majority party. So the majority party runs every committee because they also have a statistical advantage on every committee. So the chairman is a member of the majority party. In the House, it would be the Democrats, and in the Senate, it would be the Republicans. And then the other side has somebody called a ranking member, which is just the number one person for the minority. And they have very little power. The minority has very little power in how the committee is run. They can try to talk to the chairman, but the chairman doesn't have to listen. Who chooses the chairman? We've already said this. That's the Speaker of the House. So that's why it's good to be the Speaker of the House, and that's a power of the Speaker. But the chairman runs the committee. And they usually will listen to the Speaker if the Speaker tells them to do something or not to do something. Remember, there are 19 of these committees in the House and 16 in the Senate. The committees have approximately the same ratio of Republicans and Democrats that there are in the overall House. So in the overall House right now, I think it is like 55% Democrat and 45% Republican. So the committees would have that ratio or a better ratio for the majority. So they'll never have a smaller majority. They always have to have the same or bigger majority. And so that's what I mean by the same ratio as to the total House or the total Senate. And that is true both in the House and the Senate. When you get to become a member of the House or Senate, how do you know what committee you are in? And by the way, if you're a House member, you're on probably 2 or 3 committees. If you're a senator, you're on 3 or 4 committees. And how are you chosen? What committee do you go on? Well, the number one factor is where the party leadership puts you. As you get older, you can use seniority and they will take your preference more. But really early on, it's wherever the leadership wants to stick you. Now, they do take into consideration like where you are from or what your job was previously. So for instance, if Mr. Chazen became a senator or representative, since I was a former teacher, they would probably stick me on the education committee. But I'm also from St. Louis County, where Boeing is probably one of the biggest companies, and so I might want to be on the Armed Services Committee so that I can help Boeing get military contracts. I also am from an area where Anheuser-Busch is, so maybe I want to be on some sort of business committee. And I am also where there are a lot of financial things like A.G. Edwards or and all sorts of other banks and stuff. So I could be maybe on a finance committee. So they would take all of that into consideration when they're placing you on the committees. I'm going to stop right here. And then this is where we will pick up tomorrow, where we will talk about what committees actually do and why they are important.